Now to the arrest in that deadly subway push in Queens. A 31-year-old woman is being charged with murder in the case. And even more shocking, according to the Queens district attorney, she told police, quote, "I pushed a Muslim off the train tracks because I hate Hindus and Muslims ever since 2001.
Islamophobia has manifested itself in some truly spectacular displays of prejudice in the aftermath of 9/11. Violent hate crimes, like the one committed by Erica Menendez this past December, has been coupled with government protests and high publicity religious standings that really target the Muslim population of the United States. This is by no means universal, but I think that it has become prevalent enough of a trend that it warrants some analysis. My name is Melissa Boygan. Hi. I am studying Islam and its relationship to the Arab-Israeli conflict. I am interested in studying Islamophobia because I myself found that when I got to college, I was harboring a number of uninformed opinions about Muslims and Islam, and I think it was directly related to cultural Judaism in my upbringing, where I had assumed when I got to college that there was an objective truth in Zionist ideals, and therefore Palestinians, Arabs, and Muslims were some type of objective enemy. So I hope to reorient you today a little bit in your relation to Islam, especially in relation to recent events. So the first thing that's important to understand about Islamophobia is that though it is technically Islamophobia, a religious discourse, it has become racialized over the course of the past 10 or so years. So when people are performing Islamophobic behaviors, it's often turned out to be Islamophobia that targets not Islam, but people who appear to be Arab. So it's become phobia of Arab, not necessarily a phobia of Islam. When in actuality, this is interesting because only 1/5 of the world's Muslim population is Arab. I think this has something to do with the identification of many al-Qaeda terrorists as Saudi Arabian and the way that the Arab-Israeli conflict is portrayed in the United States today. So I'm going to track you through a number of instances of Islamophobia that have arisen in local contexts in the past 3 or 4 years. So, my lovely audience, you may have recognized these posters because they can be found in MTA subway stations. This is a series of advertisements sponsored by the American Freedom Defense Initiative. And this poster says, "Soon shall we cast terror into the hearts of the unbelievers," a quote from the Quran. This poster is creating the illusion that Islam is an inherently violent religion. This is, of course, not true. More than 99% of Muslims ignored the call to Islamic extremism by al-Qaeda. It's also important to recognize that no text exists in a vacuum, so pretty much any religious text can be taken out of context and utilized for any number of political aims, the Old Testament. Another example of Islamophobia has manifested itself in terms of government legislation. So this is Governor Sam Brownback of Kansas. He signed legislation into law on May 25th of 2012 that would outlaw any foreign legal code from being implemented in courts, state courts. What he was really targeting implicitly was Sharia law. Sharia law translates to the way to the watering hole loosely in Arabic. So it's a set of social and political and economic guidelines for how Muslims should live their lives. There is nothing inherently violent nor inherently anti-American about it. And I think that the Islamophobia in the decision to outlaw Sharia law is made even more obvious when one considers the immense role that Christianity plays in the American court system today. My third example hits close to home, quite literally. This is an image of a protest that arose in response to the decision to build the Ground Zero Mosque, which is quite an unfortunate misnomer when you consider that it is neither a mosque nor located at Ground Zero. What I'm referring to is the Park 51 Community Center, or the Cordoba House. So many of those who opposed this movement towards building this Islamic center, 2 blocks from where the World Trade Center once stood, kind of articulated their claims in a way that said, we are okay with Muslims here. but we are not okay with Muslims in this exact location. So we are okay with Islam. We are not okay with Islam within this particular context. We want it to be separated from this space. So again, I look to a dark moment in American history in kind of creating a cross-comparative analysis between this logic and another logic that was targeting a population of the United States at one point. The justification for these types of claims are very political and human rights-based and highly nationalistic. So, for example, Islam is inherently anti-women's rights, and therefore it has no place within the social fabric of American history. The usual culprits, I think, can be examined here in misrepresenting Islam. So I have in mind here right-wing media, conservative newscasters, and neo-Orientalist academics. But I'm interested in not how Islamophobia is perpetuated through these traditional channels, but instead how it comes from a space that we traditionally consider to be creative, imaginative, apolitical, and therefore quite benign. The entertainment industry. I will be using a Showtime Emmy-winning series Homeland to illustrate my point here. For those of you who haven't seen the show, it tells of a CIA agent's frenzied attempt at thwarting an imminent attack on American soil. It's quite dramatic. And I enjoy it, which is one of the reasons why I'm choosing to analyze it today. There are a number of misrepresentations, or I would say malrepresentation of Muslims that occurs in Homeland specifically. So the first thing that we observe is that all Muslims are either terrorists or somehow implicated within a global terrorist network. This is kind of exhibited the best in the main character of Brody, Sergeant Brody, who returns home and converts to Islam and is automatically suspect. He returns home from some space that's like vaguely sandy, and it kind of looks like Iraq, but it could be Afghanistan, and we never really know. So continuing off of that, I think that it's important to recognize how Homeland represents spaces that are traditionally occupied by Muslims, so Muslim-majority countries in the Middle East. This is a clip from Homeland that is depicting Hamra, which is a neighborhood in Beirut, Lebanon.
You need to go.
It's quite hostile. It's a hotbed for terrorism. It's everything dangerous in one. It's important to note that the CIA agents that you see in the car have done really nothing. They're just beginning an investigation. They've driven down the street and they've parked in front of an apartment building. In actuality, however, this is what Hamra really looks like. It's a diverse cultural center. It's got lots of clubs and bars and restaurants. I studied abroad in the Middle East. I went to Jordan and I visited Hamra, and it was a grand old time. So that spaces are also misrepresented in Homeland. So the most pernicious point, I think, or theme that's communicated through Homeland, however, is that American citizens must remain hyper-vigilant in examining the role of Muslims and Islam in their daily life. To falter would perhaps result in the deaths of hundreds of innocent citizens, as is represented by this scene. 1.72 million people tuned in to watch the season 2 premiere of Homeland. That's 1.72 million people who learned that Islam is a violent religion and who learned that Islamic terrorism is all around us. This is quite dangerous because in watching Homeland, when I curl up on my couch with my vat of popcorn, I am not prepared to analyze this in a way that I would analyze a neo-Orientalist text of some kind. This is propaganda couched in the form of entertainment. So, unfortunately, the United States has a dangerous history of otherizing populations by which it feels threatened. I think one of the most shameful examples of this is Japanese internment in the aftermath of Pearl Harbor. So I want you to walk away from this, on the one hand, examining the way in which you criticize different narratives that you consume, that you would not consider at first to be political. I would also like you to think about how Islam in particular is kind of playing out in these historical, cyclical, violent cycles. Arab terrorist suspects can be detained indefinitely, and that is by no means okay. So, Islam is a religion of peace. Muslims did not kill Americans on 9/11. A very small extremist group that can barely gain any footing even in the most conservative Muslim circles committed heinous crimes on 9/11. Islam is a religion of peace. So I will leave you today with a common farewell that many Arabic-speaking people and Muslims say. It is Ma salama, written here in Arabic, and it means with peace. Ma salama. Thank you.